Hey everyone, this is Nick Pateris for the Sons of a Pitch and American Soccer podcast. I had a lot of bad coffee at work today, and it's all going to serve to your benefit so we can get through all the great soccer news here in the American soccer landscape. We are covering the new coaching hires in Chicago and Miami, as well as signings that affect Atlanta and Orlando City. And in the second half of our show, we're going to discuss the roster for the USMNT January camp and their upcoming friendlies. Who's on the roster? Who was snubbed? And what impact will this have on the next phase of the United States men's national team under Greg Berhalter? All this and more on this next episode of the Sons of a Pitch, an American Soccer podcast. Well, welcome back, fans and listeners. Thank you so much for tuning in again. As I mentioned, I'm Nick Pateris, joined by my good friend and fellow host, Mike Guglielmi. Mike, as I said in the teaser, I'm all caffeinated and hyped up to talk soccer. How you feeling tonight?
I am not caffeinated. I am not hyped up. But I'm excited to talk some soccer. Just not quite caffeinated and hyped up.
All right. It is pretty late on a Tuesday. I can imagine why you wouldn't be drinking caffeine, but we're going to get right into it here, folks. And if you want to join the conversation with us, you can follow us along on social media at SOP Soccer on Twitter, at Sons of a Pitch Soccer on Facebook. You can email us, podcast at sonsofapitchsoccer.com, or you can find us on YouTube and Redbubble. Mike, why don't you give us the info for those two things?
Yeah, so sonsofapitch.redbubble.com. You can get all of the Sons of a Pitch soccer swag. We had a huge December, lots of sales, our best month so far, of course, because it's Christmas, right? But we want to continue those sales into January, so make sure to check that out. Pick yourself up an awesome t-shirt, a hoodie, you name it, you can find it on this site. I got a couple stickers and a coffee mug for work, just myself, and just make sure to purchase some Sons of a Pitch soccer swag and continue to grow the sport of soccer here in the United States and support our awesome podcast.
And Mike, you're about to release your next YouTube video as well, right?
I am. I just finished up recording the CONCACAF Champions League picks and predictions preview. It's probably about 15 minutes long or so nothing too long. A little early for some of the MLS teams in this one because the rosters aren't all finalized yet, but it's going to be a good one. Check it out. I should have it uploaded probably Tuesday morning, afternoon at some point. So take a look on that on YouTube for that one.
And we want to thank everyone who's already joined the conversation, most recently to Glenn Davis. Thank you for following us on Twitter, Glenn. For those of you who don't know, Glenn is a TV commentator for Fox Soccer and ESPN for the Houston Dynamo. So great to catch up with his content, find out what's going on with Houston and all the things in Texas soccer there. Big thanks to Nicole Bremer at Bremer Soccer Mom. Thank you for following us. They're big SKC fans. In fact, their son idolizes Johnny Russell. They call him Mini Johnny Russell, and I've seen a few pictures on her Twitter account. The kid can pull off the Scots look. He's doing a good job there. Also, thank you to the Can I Kick It podcast. Check those guys out. They have been podcasting for a while, and they cover everything, America, England, you name it. Also, thanks to Inter Miami CF. At Miami Football MLS. Thank you for following us. Keep up with them for all of their content about the latest expansion team down there in Miami. We also had a couple other accounts follow us. I don't think they're actual accounts. I think they're kind of promoting adult websites. So maybe that's a good sign that we're growing, that we're getting some of these other kind of random follows. But yeah, if you're really interested in seeing those, go on Twitter and find out, click the link for who's following our podcast.
I thought she liked
progress,
me.
I think, right?
Hey, yeah, I thought she liked me, man.
It's your voice. It brings the people flocking to you, apparently. Our social media presence is growing, whether we like it or not.
In good ways and in bad.
Yeah. But let's get right into the soccer talk. And I know a lot of our local listeners here in the Chicago area are going to be thrilled to hear that the Chicago Fire have hired a new head coach, and it's about time. This comes on a wave of hires by the organization, They brought in George Heitz as their sporting director. They brought in Sebastian Pelzer as their technical director. And now we have Raphael Wicke as head coach. So let me give you a little bit of background in this hire. And Mike, you tell me if you're as excited as Chicago Fire ownership about this. Raphael Wicke, most recently U.S. Youth National Team under-17s coach, only spent 9 months with them before taking the Fire job. Prior to that, though, coached at FC Basel over in Switzerland.
I'm going Basel, yeah.
Okay. For us Americans, I think we can go Basel. Again, a coach in the Swiss League, took them to the round of 16 in the UEFA Champions League. It is the best finish in Swiss club soccer history. I think that was a few years ago. I want to say 2016 maybe. So he has some good coaching pedigree there, but he has played 15 years as a professional prior to coaching, mostly in Germany, but did spend the final year of his career, 2008, playing with Chivas here in the MLS. He was with Chivas USA. So a little familiar with the MLS, a little familiar with the United States landscape, coaching the U17s for a little bit. But what do you think, Mike? Good hire? Mike, what are your thoughts on Raphael Wicke here?
Yeah, I'm not as high on this hiring as many others are. I'm a little bit concerned. The only positive that I see out of this hire is the fact that he has strong relationships with the sporting director, and that he had also played or coached the U.S. men's national team, the youth national team, the U17 team. Unfortunately, it was a really short tenure. It was only a couple weeks before the World Cup, and then they didn't play very well during that World Cup. But who can blame them? You've got a brand new coach in with a bunch of kids. It's going to be tough to make a good impression there. But I'm not extremely high on it. I think they could have done better. He does have some positives. Some of the players that he's brought along in the Basel system is pretty impressive. Ivan Rakitic, Shaqiri, Mo Salah, apparently he has some connections with. Maybe that's what they need to do. They need to sign Mo Salah as a DP, and that will change my mind.
Yeah, I don't think he's leaving Liverpool anytime soon. I don't think that Wicke brought over Mo Salah, but I do feel like George Heitz, their sporting director, was the one that kind of brought him up in Basel or scouted him. So I'm actually excited about this, and not just because I'm from Chicago and I have to be optimistic about Chicago sports, because otherwise I'd go kill myself if I hung on every terrible thing that Chicago sports did to me. I'm excited because you have a very unified coaching staff here. And by unified, I mean you've got a coach, a sporting director, a technical director, and an owner who are all together on the same page. They all come from similar backgrounds. They've all worked together at some point. They've got various experiences together. I think that's going to keep it uniform, something that you didn't have before with Rodriguez and Paunovic and whoever else had been around. It was very disjointed. There was no single vision. I think they have that now. From an on-the-field standpoint, I'm also excited because you know that the Chicago Fire are going to be a very technically sound team now. I haven't watched FC Basel in the past, and I don't claim to be an expert on the tactics of Raphael Wicke or what he did with the U17s. But coming from Switzerland, having played in Germany for the bulk of his career, as well as bringing in the Fire, bringing in Sebastian Pelzer as a technical director, whose biggest responsibility is going to be scouting and probably have a lot of connections with those German players, I imagine that they're going to be very technically sound. Some of the positional problems and the marking problems that you saw Paunovic's team have, or not being able to link up with their attacking options and their strikers, or their wingers playing balls into the box to nobody. I don't think you're going to have those problems anymore. They're going to have good tactics and be technically sound. Now they just got to get some players in. They don't have any DPs yet. Bring in the talent. Let's see what they can do. I'm excited about this, Mike. I think that bringing a bit of the German influence is going to really change the Chicago Fire team for the better.
Yeah, I hope so. Just as far as the chemistry and the tactically sound soccer that you expect out of this because of this hire, I don't know if he's going to get that with the amount of talent that he can have on an MLS side, right? So it's a lot different in Switzerland and Basel, one of the best clubs in Switzerland, an ownership group that's spending a ton of money because they can. I think Mansueto would spend the money if he could. Unfortunately, based on the rules, he can't. So, I don't know if you're going to get that good of a, as much of a mirror image, so to say, with that. I hope so. I'm hoping that Chicago can do well. I think they could have done a little bit better. And, they've tried the whole European thing in the past. They really have. And it hasn't worked out for them. So when they've tried the Mexican and the South American route before, it's worked for them. They filled their stadiums. They won trophies. They made it to the playoffs. Maybe this will be different. I don't know, but I probably would have went the route of someone like who we'll get into next. When Miami hired a coach that had Liga MX experience and CONCACAF experience. It's a different world over here.
Yeah, and I was thinking about that too, because it's interesting that the MLS is going very Hispanic, Latino, South American oriented, both in finding coaches. I mean, if you look at San Jose hiring Almeida, if you look at Miami's new hire, which we're going to talk about, who did Orlando City just hire? Was it Oscar Pareja?
Oscar Pareja.
Yeah, so there is a big Latin influence in MLS coaching recently, and then you're hiring DPs, signing DPs a lot who are young South American players. LAFC just signed an upcoming Uruguayan. Miami has signed a couple young Argentine players. You see a lot of these very up-and-coming, promising Latino players and Hispanic players. But Chicago's going a different direction. Like, they're going more, at least from a coaching and technical standpoint, for European, German style. And we'll see what DPs. You said you got to wait and see till Mansueto spends the money. Well, he's got 3 DP spots. He can spend the money right now if he wants to.
Right. And I think he will. I think he has to. But my thoughts are, that this is going to – it's very interesting that they're going this different route. This was something that, a lot of MLS clubs were looking at kind of 7-8 years ago before the kind of South American and Mexican swing and Central American, So it'll be interesting. Only time will tell. I hope it works out for Chicago, because I think if it fails for Chicago, it's going to be in big trouble. I don't see this team lasting if they can't cut it at Soldier Field and they don't bring at least a little bit of a winner into the league. I don't know if it's going to last.
No, I agree with you. You're not going to get, from the business side of things, you're not going to get those marginal fans coming to Soldier Field, and you're not going to get people in the suburbs coming to Soldier Field unless there's a good product on the field. And that's kind of been the side discussion with the Chicago Fire organization, is they made a huge gamble moving downtown to Soldier Field, just assuming that you're going to get more or the same ticket sales because you're in the city. You can market to people in the city. It's kind of funny. One of their latest marketing videos actually has a defender from the Chicago Red Stars wearing the Chicago Fire's new logo, which still the consensus is that it's one of the worst logos in the history of sports logos, and that it should immediately be revamped. Everything I've seen everywhere has all been negative, and that's putting it nicely. But yeah, they've got a Chicago Red Stars defender saying like, "Oh, I grew up in Chicago. I'm from the city. Come out and support the team. Hashtag stand for Chicago," or so, whatever the hashtag is. So like, they're really trying to push the marketing, but are they doing it at the expense of the average fan, of the suburban fan, of the dad with 2-3 kids who's going to try and bring the kids to the game, the family that's going to want to show up? Are they doing it at the expense of I don't know if people are coming in from out of town. Like you always go to the TFC Chicago game. Do you think it's going to affect road trip games like that going to Soldier Field?
I think it'll help the road trips because that was one of the reasons why I think a lot of people didn't come to Chicago for road trips is because they, oh, all right, let's get our flight into Chicago. And then they fly in and they get their hotel downtown Chicago, and then it's a 45-minute ride out to the stadium. So I think that really hurt that portion of it. But I don't think it's going to have a huge effect on the suburban fan. I think they'll still get to the city. The fact is you've got way more of a chance of bringing more people into the seats being in a city that has, a population of however many million that there are in Chicago. And, of course, the suburbs have a lot to do with that as well. But, I think you're going to still get a lot of the suburban fans coming in to see the soccer because the fan, the dad with 2 kids or 3 kids isn't going to every single game. They're going to maybe 1 or 2, maybe 3 max a season, and I still think they'll find a way to do that.
Yeah, even if Soldier Field charges $40 a car for parking,
you take the Metro to the L, and then you walk.
I mean, you're going to take your 3 kids on public transportation and then walk them a few blocks in the city. That's a tall order. And Mike, you got 4 kids. You know how that works out.
I do. I don't know. Maybe not.
So just things. Hopefully it works out. And as the saying goes in all of sports, winning cures everything. So let's get some DPs. Let's get a few W's, and then everything will be fine in Chicago except for the logo.
Exactly.
Okay, and with that, let's move on to the next big coaching hire, something that everyone in Miami and everyone around the league has been waiting for since Miami announced that the league announced Miami was the next expansion team. But Miami has steadfast. The ownership and management have steadfast. They said, look, we're gonna build our facilities, we're gonna build our roster, and we're gonna hire the right coach. We're not in a rush to hire a coach because we need to hire a coach. Well, it was announced today, I think Monday the 30th, that Miami has hired Diego Alonso as their first ever coach. And by the way, for comparison, Rafael Wicki is the 9th coach in Chicago history. So Chicago's been around since 98. So that's 21, 22 now seasons, and they've had 9 coaches. Not a very good look for Chicago, where they're getting a coach every 2 to 3 years. Meanwhile, here, back to Miami. Diego Alonso, he has coached around South America and Mexico, pardon me. And most recently, he won the CCL. He was Monterrey's coach when they won the CONCACAF Champions League this year. And that was a huge point for Miami ownership and management that this is someone who knows the North American landscape and might help Miami become the first team to win Champions League, which that's a long way to go to be the first MLS team to win it as an expansion team. So we'll see if that can come to fruition. The only problem was, even though he won Champions League with Monterrey, and by the way, he also won it with Pachuca back in 2016, Monterrey fired him in September. Monterrey ended up finishing 8th in the Apertura in Liga MX, that's their fall league, but ended up, after they fired him, winning the playoff and winning the Apertura that year. They also won a game in the Club World Cup. So they had the talent. I don't know if they didn't get along well with Alonso, or if that's just what you do in Mexico. Like, coaches don't last more than a year. It seems kind of odd that he's never coached a team more than 2 seasons, except for Pachuca when he was there for 4 or 5 years in the mid 2010s, 2014 to 2018. Is that any red flag to you, Mike? Do you see this as being a risky hire because of his coaching, lack of stability?
Yeah, definitely. What are the reasons for these? I mean, is it something where, you have he's been at clubs where, if you're not winning everything all the time and never losing a game, you're getting fired. That could be. I know Monterrey. I mean, the guy won the Champions League and then gets canned for finishing 8th in the Aperture and still qualifying for the playoffs. I mean, that's a bit crazy to me. That's kind of Toronto FC like era, 2009, where you just fire coaches to fire coaches. But it is a little bit concerning that he hasn't stuck around at any side very long. But I think it's a good thing that they got somebody that has that CONCACAF experience, not necessarily to win the Champions League right off the bat. I mean, if that's the reason why they're hiring this guy, they screwed up, because Inter Miami, at minimum, can't even get into the tournament until the 2021 edition, right? So that's over a year away. And as you said, an expansion team, come on, it's not going to happen. They're not going to go on and win, or even compete against these Liga MX sides for a CONCACAF Champions League after one season in a league. So it's few years down the road. I don't know if that's the right answer. They must really like what they see with this guy and what he brings as far as, his tactical awareness and whatnot. So I like the CONCACAF experience just based on the fact that he understands the Western Hemisphere's style of football/soccer. So that I like. But other than that, I don't know if maybe they're biting off more than they can chew. I mean, all 4 aspirations and and goals. That's great, but you got to be a little more realistic if that's what they were thinking.
Yeah, you're right. It's a great goal to have, but the fact that they announced that as part of the reason they hired him, like, oh yeah, we're looking for his CONCACAF experience. It's like, really? Maybe that should be a little lower on your priority list. But where I think they really liked him is that because he played for like 15 years throughout Mexico and South America and a little in Spain even, that he's familiar with the style of play that they want. He's familiar with the Latin players, especially with the roster that they've built with some young Argentine players and as well as some other South American players and Mexican players. So he'll be able to connect with them. It's probably good for recruiting to bring some players up from South America, maybe have them come play in Miami versus maybe some of the smaller leagues in Europe. So it's probably going to help recruiting. And you know what? He's got coaching experience. So I'm thinking that he's going to get Miami off to a respectable start. We'll dive into whether or not they make the playoffs when we do our roster breakdowns and team previews coming up later on in January. But I think he's a good hire. Then again, we've said that about most MLS coaches. Like, oh yeah, they're a good hire. We'll wait until they screw it up before we criticize them. But with his experience both as a player and as a coach, I mean, that he knows how to coach a team. Whether or not he can do it in Miami is a different question. And I don't know what the Miami fans' expectations are. I feel like the organization has very tempered expectations. Look, we're an expansion team. We have high goals, but we're not going to come out and win MLS Cup and the Supporter Shield in the first year and make a run at the CONCACAF Champions League in the first year. Let's just get a solid foundation, make the playoffs, and we'll see what happens. I think that the organization, based on the patience with hiring the coach, based on the way they put together a roster, that they're not saying like we have to win in the first year, otherwise we're a failure. So I'm hoping that goes through with their coach. Then again, they signed Roman Torres and Juan Agudelo, so they're putting together some good talent. Maybe they do have higher expectations, and they're not going to be shy about throwing the coach under the bus if they can't do anything the first year. That's kind of my initial impressions on it. I do expect Miami to do well, much better than Cincinnati did last year, but we'll see, Mike. Do you think the South American style, especially in the Eastern Conference, is going to bode well for Inter Miami?
Yeah, I think it'll do well in the Eastern Conference. He's got, as long as the roster that's there already is decent. So if he can bring in a couple more players and, a DP or 2, I'm not sure exactly how many spots they have left, but they're going to be able to – it'll translate well in the Eastern Conference. I think some of the teams that are there already kind of play that type of style and there's a lot of Latin America influence in the Eastern Conference. So I think they'll be okay. I'm not sure about. I can't really say if I think they're going to make the playoffs yet. I think I need a few more pieces for that, just because it takes so much to build an expansion team and get gel together and get used to playing with each other and everything like that. But overall, I think it's a good hire. It's somebody who has a lot of playing experience, and has a lot of coaching experience and has been successful. So that hopefully that translates to success in Miami for them and their fans. Only time will tell with that one. Now, as far as another team in the South, moving on here, a team, it's not quite official yet, but Atlanta United fans are starting to freak out a little bit. LGP seems to be on the move. The big talented center back that's been really a core piece for Atlanta United seems to be, according to reports, it's been confirmed that he will be moving to Tijuana of Liga MX. So Cholos for LGP. What are your thoughts, Nick?
What's the price tag? I mean, LGP, Leandro Gonzalez Perez, has been a stalwart for Atlanta United over the last several years, key in their MLS Cup run, several years. The
Yeah.
2 years they've been in the league. He's been a stalwart for them. I think he was a key starter in their Cup run, and then this last season, kind of accepting his role as a backup spot starter, but just being able to come in and never drop off in level of play for the defense there. Also, I just love the attitude and swagger that he brings. Once he gets a foul called against him or someone commits a foul on him, he just goes wild. Like, he elevates his physicality of play, and he's just fun to watch. Like, you worried for strikers coming against him one-on-one, because he would put them on their butts and not have a second thought about it. But you're right. The latest reports supposedly confirm that he is going to play at Tijuana, and if they got a good price for him, then perfect. Atlanta, they know when to sell players. They have taken an excellent business approach to their roster, not being afraid to sell Almiron, not being afraid to sell LGP, to trade Darlington Nagbe, to move pieces around. Like, they're willing to make the business moves to make sure that they're set for the future, and they're not just gonna have to do a rebuild every 3 or 4 years or something like that. So if they got a good price for him, excellent work. He's 27 years old. I imagine that they got, I don't know, maybe could they get 10 million for him? Do you think he's a double-digit player, or do you think he's more in the 5-6 million range?
That's what I'm thinking. Maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 on the high end. I don't think he's double digits, but yeah, a good move if they brought in a good amount of money. I think they're really high on Miles Robinson, as they should be. Apparently, he's the next big thing, and he's done well since he's come up. I think he came up a little quick. I think he's been a little bit overrated, but that's just my opinion. There's a lot of counter opinions to that out there, plenty of them. So I think they're high on Miles Robinson and the core that they have, and I think they feel that they can move him on. He is outspoken. He has said some things about Frank de Boer that during the season that were not taken very well by the coach. So that might have helped in the process, but they do know how to make moves and be successful with their moves and not be afraid to move on, like you said. So maybe this is just the next step in that, and we'll see it. I'm sure it will turn out well for Atlanta because they always do.
Yeah, the thing about criticizing the coach, like, the whole team did, and like everyone in the media did, and all the fans did. Like, everyone was criticizing Frank de Boer early on as for losing the locker room, for the style of play, for all of that. So if that's what it takes to move a player, then you can expect the whole roster to be turned over. Maybe he was one of the more outspoken people in the locker room about it, but I don't know if that had to do with it as much as they got a good price for him. They've got a solid up-and-comer in Miles Robinson, and I think it was a financial move more than anything. I'm just reading some of the comments on the article, and some fans are saying, hey, this is great, like, good for the club. They get rid of this crazy head case, and other people are saying, hey, we're going to miss him. So it looks like kind of a mixed bag here from the fans. But, hey, you know how online comments can be. So
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Now, another signing that came across, I believe it was yesterday, is Orlando City quietly made. I think is going to be a really good signing for them. They brought in Antonio Carlos from Palmeiras on loan. Palmeiras in Brazil. Questions around what the salary will be from this loan, if he's going to be able to qualify as a TAM player, or if he's actually going to have to hold down a DP spot for the year. Seems like a good signing. I mean, this is a guy who is a really, really good center back and has played at Flamengo in Brazil, which is probably the top club, if not one of the top clubs in Brazil. And maybe something they need in the back to really step up. Now, I think they need a goalkeeper as well. We all know the issues that they had at that position last year, but definitely looks like a good signing. A 26-year-old, well, it's not really a signing, it's a loan, so a year-long loan. But I'm sure there's some type of stipulation in there to buy at the end if they feel warranted. But yeah, I think it's going to be really good. This guy that's the head of their soccer operations is very adept at Brazilian top flight and the players that are in there. So I think I think that alone probably means this guy was probably a decent guy to add to the list. And maybe there's a little bit more to do. That roster needs a lot of work, but a good start for Orlando City by bringing in a what seems to be a pretty decent player from Brazil.
yeah, there is no doubt that Orlando City needed help along the back line. I mean, it would have been nice to have a better goalkeeper, but a goalkeeper can only do so much if your defense is letting teams walk into the box or just tee up from 18, 20, 25 yards out. Orlando City last year ended up allowing 52 goals, which not terrible when you look at FC Cincinnati giving up 75, worst in league history. Montreal gave up 60. The Revolution and the Red Bulls made the playoffs. So did Toronto and Philly, giving up between 50 and 57 goals each. So as far as like goals allowed, not crazy amount when you look at other Eastern Conference teams this last year. So I'm thinking Orlando City's thinking we get Antonio Carlos, we shore up our defense. He controls the center of that defensive formation, and they can drop that down and really win those 2-1 games or those 3-2 games and turn them around a little bit. So I think it's a great signing. The picture on the MLSsoccer.com article, like, he is so jacked up. This looks like a beast of a guy. So I'll give him the physical presence there as well. So he might even be an offensive threat. I haven't been able to look up a lot of his attacking statistics if he gets involved in some of the offense at all. But if he is a center back, I imagine he's a huge physical presence and that he is going to fit right in for a starting spot with Orlando City and really help him out. I'm excited to see his style of play and see what he can do. And you're right, at 26, he's in the prime of his career.
Yeah, absolutely. They're looking at those defenders that are on the roster right now: Alex DeJean, Robin Jansen, Kamal Miller, João Moutinho, Ruan, Rodrigo Schlegel, and Kyle Smith. They definitely need some help back there. So Antonio Carlos will definitely be a welcome addition.
Yeah, and like you said, we'll see if they can figure out the goalkeeping situation. I mean, Brian Rowe is an average, I guess you could say average MLS goalkeeper. He's inconsistent to say the least. So we'll see. But again, Orlando City, if you look at a lot of their issues, it was kind of a whole team issue. They weren't scoring goals, so they were often playing from behind, and the defense couldn't withstand some of the opposing team's pressure in order to give their offense the chances they needed to earn a draw or to get that go-ahead goal. They had those games where they were losing 4-3, and then they had those games where they were losing 3-0. So they were a very inconsistent team on both the offense and defensive sides of the ball. If he can help shore up their defense, and then maybe you get a little better offensive output from some guys like Dom Dwyer, like Tesho Akindele, like Josue Coleman. If those guys can get back to their average, maybe Orlando City's a playoff team. Is that crazy for me to say?
Yeah, that's crazy. I think they've got a long way to go to become a playoff team. Just because, you look at those forwards up front, Tesho Akindele and Dom Dwyer. Yes, they have MLS experience, but they're bigger names in MLS, but they haven't done anything in the last couple of years. Tesho Akindele came on strong into the league. I think he won like Rookie of the Year or something, if they even had that award back in the day, if they still do. But he played well in his rookie season, and then he's just been slowly downhill since then. And he has a few splashes here or there that look good. But Dom Dwyer, we all know that. He scored tons of goals for Sporting Kansas City and then just dropped off the face of the earth. They need some help up top. Their midfield's fine. They've got plenty of talent in the midfield. Yuri Rosell, Robinho, Nani, Chris Mueller off the bench, Josue Coleman. They've got a good midfield. That's the only area they don't need to improve on. I think they need a little bit of help with the defenders, maybe one striker and a new goalkeeper, and then we can start talking some playoffs.
Okay, Mike. Okay. Well, thanks for bringing me back down to earth again. I was in a very optimistic mood here, and
You're
again,
really
highly
optimistic
caffeinated.
tonight, Nick. Really, really optimistic.
Yeah,
You're
right?
very happy tonight.
Chicago is going to be technically sound, and Orlando City is going to make the playoffs. Yeah, I must have been drinking something other than just coffee. If
What
those are
was
going
in
to
that
be
coffee?
my hot takes for tonight's episode. Oh man. Well, with that, then maybe I do need a time to take a break. So why don't we'll call it halftime here. We'll get a quick word from our sponsors, and then when we come back, we're going to discuss the United States men's national team January camp.
All right, we are back from our halftime break. Thank you to our sponsors, Donovan Food Brokerage and Nice Premium Iceland Pure Spring Water. Let's talk some USMNT. Big news drop. The January camp roster was announced. It's time to talk about that. This is the future. This is the January camp where the young guys who had a good season the previous season get rewarded with a call-up. Lots of young, good talent on this roster. No veterans. Not really much of a European flavor at all. A few guys here and there that are younger, but definitely a very interesting roster from Greg Berhalter. The future is now for the U.S. men's national team. What are your thoughts on this roster, Nick?
Well, it was funny that the way you opened it up with oh gosh, what phrase did you just say? Because it was like right off of their website or something like
The future is now.
the future. I don't know, was it the future is now? I don't know. It was something you said. I was just like, oh yeah, that is, there it is. The future is us. That's their tagline right off the U.S. Soccer website. The
There you
future
go.
is us.
And I didn't even see that.
Look at that, man. You had a career in marketing. You didn't even know it.
Yeah.
Well, the first thing I got to say, no Daniel Lovitz. That's
Amen.
fantastic. Thrilled to see that he has been bumped for some other young defenders like Julian Araujo of the Galaxy, Chase Gasper of Minnesota United, Justin Glad of RSL, kind of getting a look. He had a decent season with Real Salt Lake. You got Sam Vines, Mark McKenzie from Colorado and Philadelphia, respectively. So it's good to see some of these kind of new faces get a chance at the January camp to kind of prove themselves and see if they're better than Daniel Lovitz, which I would bet that they are.
It's not.
Or at the very least have a higher ceiling for look, man, I'm not trying to knock a guy who's made a career playing professional soccer. Obviously, he did it and I couldn't. But the fact of the matter is, if we're looking at national team success here, if that's what we're going to measure, he is definitely not a guy that we want on the roster. Again, we've been saying it for the last year, since last January camp. Time has flown by, hasn't it, Mike? We were talking about a year ago, Berhalter getting hired and putting together his first roster. So we've come a long way since then. So it's great to see some of the different names that are on here. The one thing I do want to get out of the way first is 22 of the 25 players, I believe, on the roster are MLS-based players. And a lot of people are going to look at that and say, this is terrible. We need the European-based players. We can't compete at a national team level with a majority of the MLSers. Why aren't we bringing in more guys? Well, here's the thing, everybody. You can say that there is some sort of MLS bias with Berhalter, Greg, and Jay, his brother, who is in U.S. soccer. You can say that the other U.S. soccer people want to see MLS-based players. And this conspiracy theory goes all the way back to Jurgen Klinsmann and why he got ousted and why they kept bringing back people like Bruce Arena, because they would cater to the MLS model and the money that was there and blah, 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 blah. And there might be a little truth to that. But I think the bigger picture is you've got European guys who are in mid-season. Their clubs aren't going to release them. You're going to just develop bad relationships with these clubs and these players if you start demanding they show up for friendlies in January when, say, a guy like Christian Pulisic is trying to get Chelsea back to the Champions League, when you've got guys like Tyler Adams who are trying to help their clubs in the Bundesliga fight for a top spot, or guys like Tyler Adams and Christian Pulisic too, who are trying to just stave off some nagging injuries. So I'm not buying the whole conspiracy theory at this point because it's January camp, it's midseason for the European leagues. I expected to see a lot of MLSers, and hey, maybe they're actually scouting some young American talent, American-based talent. So I think we need to temper everyone's expectations by saying that first. Do you agree with me, Mike, or are you still demanding that our best players be called up for everything?
I agree with you 100%. It's a youth camp. It's the time to give these guys an opportunity type of camp. A lot of the younger guys are based in MLS. There's a few that are overseas, but there are a lot of younger guys that are in MLS. And you've got a huge point with trying to get these club teams over in Europe to release these players in the middle of the season for really a meaningless camp. When it all comes down to it, it's a meaningless camp. It really is. It's not the roster. This is not, there's a few guys who will make a few appearances during the competitive nature and even some of the friendlies in mid MLS season, off season for over in Europe. But it's not a big deal. So everybody just needs to chill out on that perspective. Give these guys a shot who are playing in MLS that are in their off season, and try and bring that young talent up. Obviously, they did bring some young talent in, like Ulysses Lainez from Wolfsburg. They've got, Christian Kappas. I have no idea who that is, as Hobro. There's a few different clubs outside of MLS that are represented here, but not many. And I'm okay with that. I have no problem with it whatsoever.
You want to talk about bringing in young players. Look at midfielder Brian Cayo. He is technically unattached. He doesn't have a club. He played with Orange County SC and most recently had an appearance with Loudoun United. Like, this guy's never played in the MLS, and he got a call-up, probably because of his performance in the Under-17 World Cup. But still, what does that tell you? We got a guy who's not actually signed by a club right now on the U.S. National team roster. Is that good for development, or is that terrible for the current status of the United States men's national team? I guess, are you glass half empty or glass half full kind of guy? But as we said, I'm in an optimistic mood tonight. So I'm going to say this is great. They're actually doing some depth scouting here. That to me is the biggest thing of this roster is all the young players that are going to get their chance to prove themselves. We can even look at the goalkeeping. JT Marcinowski and Matt Turner of San Jose, New England. Those are a couple guys who had a couple good seasons in MLS, and now they have gotten called up, especially with Atlanta United not releasing Brad Guzan or Miles Robinson. And there was one other player that they didn't release. Who is it? Brooks Lennon. Yeah. Atlanta didn't release those three players to the U.S. camp. So these guys get to fill in. I'm a little curious as to why Bill Hamid is on the roster. I don't know if he's really going to be competing when it comes time to play really meaningful competitive games. But I imagine Sean Johnson is going to be our starting goalkeeper, and maybe you see some of these other guys split time. You look at the midfield, Sebastian Legit, Paxton Comical, Jackson Ewell, those are going to be your guys. Maybe Christian Roldan, if he can prove himself. A lot of people are down on Roldan. Where do you sit on him, Mike? Is he a guy you see being a future starter for the national team, or is he just kind of a guy right now until they find the next guy?
I think he's a future piece in the puzzle. I don't know if he's going to be a starter. He might be a starter a few games. He might, be a bench type player. I don't see him being a superstar for the U.S. men's national team, but he's definitely a good piece to have on the roster, especially as like a bench type player. So as far as the goalkeepers, you were talking about Bill Hamid. There's nobody else in MLS really that's going to compete to get on this roster. They're set with their starters, right? You've got Zach Steffen and Evan Horvath. They've got a couple other guys over in Europe that are probably going to be the backups. So they're really set there. So why not bring a guy in like Bill Hamid and shut him up a little bit? So the same thing is some of these guys like Roldan and Ewell and they're guys they're going to get their shot. Not really big time pieces, but a good depth pieces. So I'm okay with it. I think it's as I said, I think it's a good roster. I think it's good to see some of the younger guys getting a chance to prove themselves on a national level to at least try and be in the picture when it comes later on down the road.
Right, and to add to your point about Christian Kappes playing for Hobro IK in the Danish Superliga, he actually came up with the Dallas youth program. So he's played with the U20s for the United States, only 2 caps, but 2 goals. So, hey, maybe they're going to give him a shot and see if he can't be a bit of a playmaker for them. Now, looking at the strikers, some of the usual suspects, Paul Arriola, Jordan Morris, and Giassi Zardes. Great to see Jonathan Lewis of the Colorado Rapids getting the call-up. He had an excellent season this year for Colorado. Jesus Ferreira of FC Dallas getting the call-up. So his play, again, that youth movement in Dallas, not going unnoticed, but on the national team level. And then you said Ulysses Lainez playing in Wolfsburg, one of the few overseas guys that is on the roster. I have not been following him too closely. Apparently he's doing something in order to get the call-up. But he has been a name on the lips of a lot of people in U.S. soccer and the fans of U.S. soccer who want to see some of these international guys taking a greater role within the national team, bringing a different ability and striking talent, someone who can create their own opportunities, which has been something sorely lacking from strikers in the United States. Mostly they're getting goals off of set pieces, or they're getting goals from through balls, one touches, things. They're not able to take defenders one-on-one. You have one of the best strikers the United States has had in recent history, Josie Altidore, who is known for his hold-up play and his work inside the box, not so much beating defenders one-on-one, but being able to out-physical them, get in a good position, and put the ball home. So maybe we get to see that next generation of U.S. strikers have a little more creativity, have a little more flair, if you will. We'll see what they can offer. The one thing I wanted to ask you, Mike, speaking of Josie Altidore, are you surprised that he or Michael Bradley is no longer on this roster?
Not at all. They're veteran type players. They don't need to come to a January camp. They're still going to get call-ups when push comes to shove. Michael Bradley's a leader. He's a veteran presence. Same thing. Josie Altidore's a veteran presence. I don't know if I'd go a leader, but I'm not concerned at all about this. I wouldn't expect to see them on this type of roster. I'm a little surprised with Giassi Zardes, though, being on this roster. That kind of piques my interest a little bit. I mean, why? He's kind of a veteran. He's been around a long time. He's not really a young guy. I mean, he's still young, comparatively speaking, but he's not. He's not a Jesus Ferreira or a Jonathan Lewis or Ulysses Lainez. So I'm a little confused on that one, but I really don't. There's no concern in my eyes for Bradley and Josie not being on these rosters. I don't expect to see them too much. I think they'll still factor into the U.S. national team picture, but I don't expect them to be superstars like they were, or if you even want to call them that. But stars that were definitely on every roster. I don't think it's going to be that way going forward.
It'll be interesting to see, like you said, speaking of the strikers, having Zardes on there still and listing, 6 strikers. I'm kind of curious if they might play like a side-by-side striker, or a one over the other, maybe like a 4-4-1-1, or having a dual striker up top where you can pair a young striker like Jesus Ferreira or Jonathan Lewis next to Giassi Zardes and Jordan Morris and have them kind of learn off each other. We've seen Berhalter do that in the past, where he has a guy like Will Trapp, again, noticeably absent from this roster, someone who probably isn't going to be part of the roster when the U.S. is competing in serious games, World Cup qualifying, or at least not in a starting role, but someone who knows the system and can help those around him get coached up and be kind of a coach on the field, direct them, play the balls where they need to go. That could be a role of Giassi Zardes right now. And then just kind of seeing how he works together with Luis Lanes Ferreira. We know Giassi Zardes, is his best attribute is him being a striker and a forward that can also facilitate, has an excellent one-touch, excellent first touch, can play guys off of that first touch, the flicks from his feet and from his head. He can find the space. He can direct players into the space with where he plays the ball. So he could be doing that, either playing himself into this roster spot and keeping it, or helping these other young guys grow some more. So that's what I expect to see. I expect to see Morris or Zardes paired with one of the young guys. And Paul Arriola, I love his wing play. I think he is faster than people give him credit for. I think he's smarter than people give him credit for. And he's not afraid to take a defender one-on-one. Kind of what I was talking about earlier is we need someone who has that one-on-one ability that will have to draw defenders to him and open up space for the rest of these strikers to get their goals, to get those easy tap-ins, and find the easy scoring opportunities. So that's what I expect to see. I don't think Berhalter is going to change his system much. Maybe make a few little tweaks based on some of these results that we saw, some of the more disappointing or surprising results we saw recently. And speaking of the results, I'm sorry, Mike, go ahead, jump in.
No, I agreed. I think I think that's definitely a good point on Arriola. I think they've got that. They've got a couple players that are European based as well that can do that. One being Christian Pulisic if he plays in that role. But also what was the name of that young kid? I've been trying to think about it since you were talking about it and I forgot. But there's a guy out there. I can't remember his name, but he's kind of that same type of go at the guys one-on-one, draw the defenders out to wings. No, it's not Jeff Sargent. It's who's the guy I was ragging on really hard during one of the games. And
could be a few guys, Mike.
Yeah, probably. But his name will come to me eventually. But I think that's a good look there for Paul Arriola to try and get into that mix. But overall, it's good. Will Trapp not being there, Ledesma, Mason Toye, those are names that I kind of expected not to be there. I don't see Will Trapp. I think the only reason he was on the team to begin with was because of Berhalter, and Berhalter's been taking some heat, even though things have turned around a little bit as of late. So maybe he's kind of given up his core guys that he likes a lot, like Daniel Lovitz and Will Trapp.
So looking at the schedule upcoming, the U.S. men's team has friendlies starting in February 1st. They will take on Costa Rica out in California, and then they'll take on the Netherlands at the end of March, actually over in Eindhoven in the Netherlands. So those are a couple big games. Costa Rica is an excellent measuring stick as far as a CONCACAF opponent, someone they're definitely going to see in the Hex, someone they're going to definitely be seeing in the Nations League. I think a number of Costa Rican players are playing throughout the MLS. guys that they're going to be familiar with, and as they say, familiarity breeds contempt. So I know that'll be a physical game and a very hard-fought game, despite being an international friendly. And then you've got a friendly in March against the Netherlands. Interesting team, Mike. Why do you think they'd want to play the Netherlands with Serginho Dest maybe coming into the lineup at that point?
Yeah, I think he'll definitely be on the roster for that one. Yeah,
and I would imagine the Dutch team. Yeah, I imagine the Dutch team's going to want to come out and stick it to the U.S. in that one.
Agreed.
There are a number of other friendlies that have not actually been scheduled. I think you said I think the U.S. is going to play a game against Iceland. You said Canada was going to play a game against them.
Yeah, Canada is actually scheduled a friendly for against Iceland to try and boost their FIFA rankings for the Hex since they got booted out of the Nations League after losing to the U.S. And then U.S. ended up beating Cuba handily as was expected. They they finished second in the Nations League, so still stay in Group A, but it hurt their chances a little bit to get into the Hex. So they need some points, and who better than to pick a squad that can help them in the rankings? That is a very good team, don't get me wrong, but there's a chance they could pull it off. So a good scheduling pickup for Canada.
Absolutely, Mike. And with that, I think that kind of is how we should be watching these games. For Canada, looking for a difficult schedule to try and boost their rankings. But as far as the United States goes, right now it's just young players. So let's temper our expectations. And I don't know if this is deliberate on the part of U.S. Soccer. If you've got the conspiracy theory hat on, they're bringing in all these young new guys. That way, when they lose the games, they can say, "Well, it's because these guys are inexperienced, and we're just playing to develop them, not so much to win right now." I think that's kind of the conspiracy theory behind it. But the other thing that's really neat, though, is that you're bringing in a lot of these young guys, and camp is actually taking place in Qatar, or Qatar, however you want to pronounce it, which is where the 2022 FIFA World Cup will be. So they're trying to get some of these young guys who may be on the World Cup roster used to playing in the host country already. Does that do anything for you, Mike? Is that just good planning, or is it, whatever, qualify first?
Well, it's whatever, qualify first. But I mean, I think it's a good game plan. I think it shows that they're expecting to be there, as they should. And the fans have made their voices clear that anything less than qualifying for the next World Cup would be a major, major disappointment. And I think it's a good look from the management there for the USMNT to say, hey, we're going to do this camp here because we're planning on being here. There's no other expectation than to be playing in the 2022 World Cup.
And with that, Mike, again, we just got to make sure we're watching the games for the right reasons. I can't emphasize that enough to U.S. soccer fans. There's so much hate and just ignorance out there about, like, why can't we win all these games? And the expectation should be to win. But I'm being in that optimistic mood right now where we just need to let the process work itself out, and let's see what these young guys can do, and let's have some fun watching the next generation of U.S. soccer youth programs here come up and take flight. And that's kind of the final thoughts I want to leave here tonight, Mike, as we kind of wrap things up. So what's on your mind? Give us your final thought and then bring us home.
My final thought as far as USMNT is, you're right, Nick. Temper the expectations in this January camp. Look, when we're talking qualifying, when we're talking Nations League games against Costa Rica and Mexico, if the team throws up a dud and it's the top 11, top 18 that they've got out there, then get pissed off. Right now, there's no need to get worried about if they don't come out and play well against Costa Rica in the beginning of February with a roster of guys who will maybe get 5 caps in their career if they're lucky. So it just temper the expectations for right now. They are trying to grow the game. That's what the January camp has always been about. So hopefully people just chill out a little bit with that And then let's get serious once we're talking the Nations League games and the qualifiers. Once those come out, then we can get crazy and get full of hate if they lose a little bit. Be mad, get upset about it, voice your opinions. But until then, just chill out and be optimistic like Nick. And that is my final thought.
Well, thanks, Mike. And thank you to our listeners, to our sponsors. We appreciate you giving us your time once again. We'll be back next week with some more U.S. soccer talk, some more MLS soccer talk. And stay tuned because mid-January, we're going to start coming out with our team previews for the 2020 MLS season. Thanks, everyone, and have a great one.